The antique shop stood quietly on the corner of Elm and Main Streets, itself a dusty relic. Its wooden sign, adorned with faded gold letters, read Leonard's Curiosities. Inside was the scent of old wood and worn cloth, a haven for those who cherish the past. Leonard, a man in his 50s with silver hair and glasses perpetually perched on the tip of his nose, was very proud of his collection. He had spent decades collecting a variety of unusual objects, each with its own story to tell. One drizzly afternoon, Leonard attended an estate sale on the outskirts of town. The house, a dilapidated mansion surrounded by overgrown gardens, had belonged to the late Dr. Elwood, a reclusive scholar of folklore and macabre phenomena. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the empty halls as bidders pored over the remnants of Dr. Elwood's life. Leonard's attention was drawn to a room at the end of a dim corridor where many curiosities were spread out on a heavy oak table. Among the trinkets, one object stood out, a marionette. It was unlike anything Leonard had ever seen before. The puppet was about 2 feet tall, carved from a dark wood that seemed almost black in the dusky light. Her face was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, with sharp features and glass eyes that seemed terrifyingly realistic. The puppet was dressed in a tattered velvet costume, her limbs connected and tied together with fine, though frayed, threads. An unsettling aura emanated from her, as if she held a secret too terrible to utter. Leonard's curiosity overpowered his discomfort. He bet on the puppet, and after a brief contest with the shadowy figure in the wide-brimmed hat, he won. The puppet was his. As he carried it to his car, he was undaunted by the feeling that its eyes were following him, silently watching his every move. Back in the store, Leonard carefully placed the puppet in a prominent place, hoping it would attract the attention of his customers. It did. Almost immediately, the shop was flooded with visitors, all of whom were attracted by the puppet's uncanny charm. Some admired her skill, others whispered anxiously about her sinister appearance. Business was booming, but Leonard could not ignore the growing sense of unease that accompanied the puppet's presence. At night, as the store emptied and the streets grew quiet, Leonard began to hear something. It began with faint, almost imperceptible creaks, like footsteps on old floorboards. Then came whispers, just beyond the edge of hearing, the source of which was impossible to determine. He decided they were the sounds of an old building settling, or perhaps echoes of his own tired mind. Dreams, on the other hand, were harder to ignore. Every night Leonard dreamed of the puppet. In his dreams, she was not a lifeless puppet, but a living thing, dancing in the pale moonlight, her strings moving of their own accord. She whispered to him in an incomprehensible language, but the meaning was clear. She wanted something from him. Leonard awoke in a cold sweat, and the image of the dancing puppet was imprinted on his mind. One morning, as he unlocked the store and stepped inside, he noticed something strange. The puppet was not in its usual place. It shifted slightly, as if it had taken a step forward. Leonard's heart raced, but he told himself it was impossible. Puppets don't move on their own. He returned her to her original position and went about his business, trying to ignore the nagging fear, but he sensed something was wrong. Anxiety was growing, undermining Leonard's sanity. The puppet's glazed eyes seemed to be watching him more and more closely, and a sinister smirk mocked his growing fear. Leonard realized he had to learn more about this disturbing artifact. Determined to find out the puppet's origins, Leonard immersed himself in research. He began with Dr. Elwood's estate, hoping to find clues about the puppet's history. Visiting the local library, he discovered records of the late doctor's life. Dr. Elwood was a renowned scholar with a passion for the occult and dark folklore. Leonard found a reference in Elwood's diary to a particularly disturbing chapter that recounted the acquisition of a cursed doll in an obscure European village. Leonard flipped through the diary, piecing together fragments of Elwood's research. According to the records, the puppet was created by a master puppeteer named Vladislav Varga in the 18th century. Varga was infamous for his creepy, realistic creations, but the marionette was considered his magnificent creation. The puppet was so realistic that it seemed to possess a soul. Legend has it that Varga used forbidden rituals to bind the spirit of his deceased daughter Mariska to the puppet. Rumor had it that Mariska had been murdered, and Varga, mad with grief, sought to bring her back by any means necessary. Delving deeper into the diary, Leonard found references to mysterious disappearances and deaths associated with the puppet. It was believed that those who possessed it suffered from madness, as if the cursed spirit of the puppet was exacting revenge for its untimely death. The journal warned that the puppet would not rest until it had taken enough souls to free Mariska's spirit from its wooden prison. Leonard's heart raced as he read the last entries in Elwood's journal. The doctor had realized the danger of the puppet too late. His last entry was a desperate plea for help, and the scrawled note indicated that the very puppet he had acquired was after him. Leonard's thoughts raced, fear growing with each passing moment. He had to get rid of the puppet before it was too late. That night, Leonard tried to sleep, but the whispers grew louder, filling his ears with a cacophony of voices. The puppet's eyes seemed to glow in the darkness, and its wooden body creaked as if trying to move. Leonard tossed and turned, unable to shake off the feeling that he was being watched. Suddenly he was awakened by the sound of laughter, loud and sinister, echoing through the store. He sat up and peered into the shadows. The puppet was no longer on the shelf. It stood in the center of the room, head tilted at an unnatural angle, staring at him with glassy eyes. Leonard gasped with panic. He felt an oppressive presence in the room, something ancient and malevolent. He jumped out of bed, determined to destroy the puppet once and for all. He grabbed a hammer from the workbench, and his hands trembled as he approached the puppet. But as he raised the hammer, he felt an invisible force grab his hand, freezing him in place. The puppet's mouth curved in a grotesque smile, and Leonard felt a cold chill run down his spine. He tried to swing the hammer, but his body wouldn't listen. The whispering grew louder, filling his mind with a deafening roar. Leonard's vision blurred, and the puppet's eyes seemed to sink into his soul. In that moment he realized the truth. The puppet was alive and coming for him. Leonard collapsed to the floor, his consciousness staggered as the puppet moved forward. He felt cold wooden fingers touch his face and screamed, the sound echoing through the empty store. As darkness engulfed him, Leonard realized he had underestimated the power of the puppet. The puppet was not just a toy, but a vessel of vengeance, a conduit for a restless spirit that would stop at nothing to achieve its goal. The next morning, Leonard's assistant, a young woman named Clara, came into the store. The shelves were overturned, Books were strewn across the floor, and Leonard was nowhere to be found. She called out to him, but there was no answer. The store felt wrong, colder, darker, as if the air itself was saturated with fear. Clara noticed the puppet lying in the middle of the floor, its threads tangled, its eyes dimmed. She felt an inexplicable urge to pick it up and examine it more closely. When she reached for the puppet, a sharp pain pierced her hand, and she recoiled fearfully. She noticed a small cut on her palm, oozing blood. The puppet's glazed eyes glittered as if mocking her. Unable to calm down, Clara decided to clean up the store and look for Leonard. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened to him. While she was working, she found Elwood's diary on Leonard's desk, the pages of which were open on the section about the puppet. She took a cursory look at the entries, and with each word her fear grew. Clara realized that Leonard had been researching the puppet's origins, and she understood the danger it posed. She knew she had to find a way to destroy it, to break the curse that bound Mariska's spirit. But as the day wore on, she began to feel the same oppressive presence that Leonard had described. The whispers grew louder, filling her mind with a relentless, maddening chorus. That night, Clara stayed in the shop, determined to keep an eye on the marionette. She watched as its eyes seemed to follow her every move, its sinister grin never wavering. The whispers grew louder, and Clara felt her sanity slipping away. She knew she had to act before it was too late. Section 4. The Confrontation. Clara decided to perform a ritual she found in Elwood's journal, one that promised to break the marionette's curse and free Mariska's spirit. She gathered the necessary items, candles, salt, and a piece of iron, and began the ritual, her hands trembling as she chanted the incantation. As she spoke the final words, the room grew colder, and the marionette's eyes glowed with an unholy light. The whispers turned into screams, and Clara felt a powerful force push her to the ground. She watched in horror as the marionette began to move on its own, its wooden limbs creaking as it advanced toward her. Clara fought to maintain her focus, continuing the ritual despite the terror that gripped her heart. The marionette's movements became more erratic, its glassy eyes wide with fury. Clara felt the air grow thick with malevolence, the room darkening as the puppet closed in. With a final desperate cry, Clara completed the ritual, the iron piece glowing with a brilliant light. The marionette let out a bone-chilling scream, its body convulsing as the curse was broken. The puppet fell to the ground, lifeless and still, its eyes dull and empty. Clara lay on the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. She had done it. She had broken the curse and freed Mariska's spirit. But as she looked at the marionette, she couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't truly gone. The whispers had stopped, but the memory of their sinister words lingered in her mind. She knew that the marionette would never truly be at rest, that its curse could return if it fell into the wrong hands. Clara decided to bury the puppet, to hide it away where no one would ever find it. She wrapped it in cloth and left the shop, determined to put an end to its reign of terror once and for all. As she buried the marionette deep in the woods, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The puppet's curse had been broken, but its dark legacy would never be forgotten. She returned to the shop, hoping that Leonard would one day be found, that the nightmare would finally be over. But deep in the forest, beneath the cold earth, the marionette lay in wait, its sinister grin hidden from the world. Its eyes, now closed, held the promise of vengeance, a silent reminder that some curses can never truly be broken. Years passed, and the events surrounding the cursed marionette faded into the shadows of memory. Clara continued to run the antique shop, always haunted by the specter of that night, but determined to keep the marionette's dark secret buried. She never spoke of the puppet or Leonard's disappearance, hoping that silence would bring peace. One rainy evening, a young couple wandered into the shop, seeking refuge from the storm. They marveled at the antique items, their curiosity piqued by the shop's eerie atmosphere. Clara watched them with a wary eye, her mind drifting back to the marionette and the horrors it had brought. She couldn't shake the feeling that danger was never far away. As the couple explored, the man noticed an old, tattered book on one of the shelves. It was Dr. Elwood's journal, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. Intrigued, he picked it up and began to read. Clara's heart skipped a beat when she saw the journal in his hands, a chill running down her spine. She approached them, her voice steady but firm, and gently took the book from his hands, placing it back on the shelf. She told them it was not for sale, her tone leaving no room for argument. The couple left soon after, but Clara's unease lingered. She closed the shop early, her thoughts consumed by the marionette and the journal. She knew she had to revisit the spot where she had buried the puppet, to ensure it remained hidden. That night, armed with a shovel and a flashlight, she ventured into the woods, the memories of that fateful night flooding back with each step. As she reached the burial site, Clara noticed something was wrong. The ground had been disturbed, the earth freshly turned. Her heart pounded in her chest as she dug frantically, dirt flying in all directions. When her shovel struck something hard, she fell to her knees, her hands clawing at the soil. The marionette lay there, its wooden body as lifeless as the day she buried it. But its eyes, those haunting, glassy eyes, were open, and they seemed to glow with a faint, malevolent light. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she realized the curse had not been broken. It had only been waiting. Before she could react, a cold hand gripped her shoulder. She spun around, her flashlight illuminating a figure standing in the shadows. It was Leonard, or what was left of him. His eyes were vacant, his skin pale and waxy. He moved with a jerky, puppet-like motion, his body seemingly controlled by an unseen force. Clara stumbled back, her mind reeling with terror. Leonard's voice, a hollow echo of its former self, filled the air, the words barely intelligible. He spoke of the marionette's power, of the curse that bound them both. The puppet had claimed him, and now it sought another soul to bind. With a surge of desperation, Clara grabbed the iron piece she had brought, hoping to complete the ritual once more. But Leonard's grip was too strong, his strength fueled by the puppet's dark magic. He overpowered her, forcing her to the ground as the marionette's eyes glowed brighter, its malevolent presence filling the clearing. As Clara's vision blurred, she realized there was no escape. The marionette's curse was eternal, its hunger insatiable. The last thing she saw was the puppet's twisted smile, its wooden face a mask of pure evil. The darkness closed in, and the whispers began again, louder and more insistent than ever. In the heart of the woods, the marionette claimed another victim, its curse continuing to spread. The town spoke of Clara's disappearance in hushed tones, another mystery added to the list. The antique shop fell into disrepair, its secrets buried with the past. But those who ventured too close to the forest at night swore they could hear the faint sound of laughter, high-pitched and sinister, echoing through the trees. The marionette's legacy lived on, a reminder that some evils can never be truly vanquished.